and realized that by renting by the room, you can basically double the amount of rental income you could get on the property. It's kind of like in New York, for example, you could sell the whole pizza, for example, like a large pizza for, let's say, $20, or you can sell it, cut it into like 6 slices and sell by the slice for $7 a slice and make $42. So you can make double the revenue on the exact same pizza. Same thing for housing. If you rent by the room, you make double the revenue typically.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Peak Profits podcast. Today's guest is Ryan Chaw, founder of Newbie Real Estate Investing. Ryan's real estate journey began with an inspiring family legacy. His grandfather overcame discrimination in the 1950s, purchased 3 rental properties in the San Francisco Bay Area, using the rental income to help pay for Ryan and his brother's college education. That legacy inspired Ryan to create his own. Ryan graduated as a pharmacist in 2016 and worked in infectious diseases and pediatrics before applying his passion for service to real estate. Starting with just 1 property per year, he built a portfolio of high-quality student housing by renting homes by the room rather than as a single unit. Ryan, welcome to the Peak Profits podcast. How are you today?
Thanks for inviting me on. I'm doing great.
That's awesome. It would be great if you could kind of bring us back to the start. Obviously, your grandfather's legacy is a huge part of what you've been able to build. So kind of bring us all the way back to that and how that's influenced and helped you throughout your career.
Yeah, when my grandpa was able to buy those properties in the Bay Area back in the 50s when they were dirt cheap, over time, it really, obviously, we've seen a lot of appreciation. Rents went up like crazy. And he was not only able to just retire early, but help cover our college tuition. That's when I realized that real estate is one of the best ways to create generational wealth. And so I wanted to get started as soon as possible. I graduated with my doctorate of pharmacy in 2015, and I just worked like hell to get as much capital as possible. I worked like retail pharmacy at Rite Aid, and I work as a hospital pharmacist in infectious diseases. And I was working like 16-hour shifts to save up a lot of capital to buy my first property. I bought the first property. It was a $262,000 house in Stockton, California. And I rented it out to college students at my alma mater college where I went to pharmacy school. I kind of stumbled upon this strategy and got a little bit lucky and realized that by renting by the room, you can basically double the amount of rental income you could get on the property. It's kind of like in New York, for example, you could sell the whole pizza, for example, like a large pizza for, let's say, $20, or you can sell it, cut it into like 6 slices and sell by the slice for $7 a slice and make $42. So you can make double the revenue on the exact same pizza. Same thing for housing. You know, if you rent by the room, you make double the revenue typically. And if you rent out 6 bedrooms for $700 a month each, it's typically around $4,200 for those 6 bedrooms. So that's why I continued to reinvest that cash flow. As you said, buy 1 property a year. That was my goal, is just, keep grinding, making that money, capital to buy 1 property a year. And eventually I was able to replace my pharmacist salary, and I was able to retire at the age of 31.
That's incredible. When you were going into that first property, did you have like an underwriting framework down? Like, how did you go into that initial property to ultimately make sure that you could cover the rents? You said there that you stumbled into it a little bit. So I'm interested, was this just, I'm going to buy it and figure it out? Did you have all of your ducks in a row on that first property? How did that all come about?
I didn't know very much on my first property. In fact, I did it was only $262,000, but I put $100,000 down on it because I didn't know what I was doing. I was like, oh, 100K sounds like a nice round number. Let me go ahead and put that in. And I didn't realize that most people only do 20% down. So I basically was figuring things out along the way. As you can tell, I was pretty naive, but I was lucky the realtor was able to kind of show me what to look for. He would go into a house, for example, and he would say, yeah, this roof looks very old. It's missing some shingles. You can tell some of them are falling off. I would not recommend this house unless the seller agrees to pay for, replacing the roof or replacing the shingles on the roof, for example. And so I kind of learned through trial and error. I actually did lose a lot of money on that first house. I lost over $30,000 because I didn't know what to look for. For example, I had like about 3 months after I bought it, I had this tenant call me, my very first tenant, and he said, "Dude, there's like this poop that's coming out of the kitchen sink, spewing out of the kitchen sink. It's all over the floor." The flooring, the nice new flooring, and then it's also backing out in the showers, and it smells, like poop, obviously, like sewage. And so I stuck a camera down the pipe and found that the whole line was broken because there were these really large tree roots that were sticking in the pipe. And I had to replace the whole line for about $9,000. Now, there's a lot of other things that I had to replace on that very first house, but I realized that I could have just done a little bit more due diligence. In fact, if I did a sewage lateral line inspection, which only costs like $200, $300, I could have found that the line was already kind of broken and had the seller pay for the replacement of the line before I closed on the property. But because I closed on the property already, I had to make the full repair and pay for all the costs.
And how did that impact kind of you? You mentioned there that you lost $30,000 on that property. Was that
Yes.
from cash flow that you lost that 30,000? Was it just you had to pay the additional 30,000? Like, how did you come up to that number?
Yeah, so the sewage line was $9,000. I also had to put in an AC system because the house had no AC. It was a very old 100-year-old house. And so I had to go with mini splits because there wasn't even duct work at the house. So it cost me $15,000 to do that. So that was already 24K. And then I had some like a lot of pest issues, rats, cockroaches, etc. And so they were kind of getting in through the openings around the outside of the house. And so I had to patch all those openings. And then finally, I had to like replace a deck that was rotting. So there was a lot of things that just happened that I realized I could have just done a little bit more thorough inspections. Like I could have hired maybe a plumber to scope the sewage line, right? I could have had an HVAC person kind of comment about the heating and the cooling at the house. An HVAC technician, that is, and just by making those like $100, $200, basically the, paying that fee to have the technician to come out and comment on it would have saved me a ton of money. And I realized that later on, right?
Okay, so now that you've kind of spoken about some of the lessons that you've learned from your first property, how has that changed when you are now going to those properties? Do you have more of a formalized underwriting structure now that you've learned a lot more? Do you obviously do some of the inspections that you've mentioned there on these properties? Like, what has changed when you now look at one of the properties that you're going to buy with the mindset of knowing you're looking to turn this into a rent by room property?
Yeah, so you do have to have a different buy box for the rent by the room strategy for sure. What I do is I invest very close to the local colleges because for a lot of these college students, they rather pay like 600, 700 to stay off campus and have their own private room versus have to live at the dormitory for like $1,200 a month. It's like half the cost with a lot more privacy. They don't have to live with a roommate. They don't have to pay for parking or a meal plan that most colleges force upon students. And so it just makes a lot of sense for these kids. And what I do is I invest like within a 5 minute driving distance to the college. So that it's conveniently located nearby the college. They can wake up and get to their 8 a.m. classes. They can basically wake up at like 7:50 a.m. and then roll out of bed and go to class, right? And that's kind of the ideal scenario for most college students. So the closer the better, and it kind of creates this competition moat around me because if I'm right across the street from the college, for instance, I'm going to be chosen, like my rental will be chosen. Even if I charge a little bit higher pricing, they will choose my rental over any others that are like, 3 minutes or 4 minutes further drive away because I'm just so close to the school. The second thing I look for is also how large is the house too, because if it's 1,500 square foot or more, usually I can get it to 6 bedrooms. Now, I have this rule of 300 where you divide the total square footage by 300, and that gives you how many you can definitely get at the house. So 1,500 divided by 300 is 5. 1,800 square foot divided by 300 is 6. So ideally, if it's like 1,800 square foot, I can definitely get 6 people at the house. And that's kind of like a good sweet spot because people, have friends, maybe like 5 or 6 friends that want to take the entire house. And so they'll rent out all 6 bedrooms, $700 per bedroom to make like, about $4,200 a month or so in rental income. So I really look for those larger square footage houses that are close by the school and also are in safe neighborhoods. So obviously, if you see like a lot of homeless walking around or you see a lot of trash around the street, so it doesn't feel safe, no parent is going to want their child to stay there, right? So you have to be really cognizant of the neighborhood that you're in as well. And the last thing I would say is just being affordable too. So, check out what the rent prices are in the area by going to Reddit, for example, and seeing what people are charging for off campus housing. I also look for like areas that the graduate students are liking, ideally staying in, because I really want to rent to graduate students if possible, and being there by the graduate campus, because those are really good high quality tenants that are really focused on getting their professional degree, whether it be like a doctorate of pharmacy, MD, nursing degree, etc.
And when you're going through that, that's already quite a lot. When you're not just looking at these houses now as like this is a house, you're already kind of thinking about renovations that might need to happen to add additional rooms. How does that actually work? Like, it would be great if you could maybe take one of the properties you've done this with and kind of run us through what your initial kind of cost for it was, the size of the property. Is there anything you have to do differently from a mortgage perspective because it's a rent by the room versus a traditional home? Like, can you just walk us through one of the properties that you've gone through this with and kind of talk us through step by step all of the stages you had to go through?
For sure. So I bought this really large property nearby Case Western in Ohio, and basically I bought it for 367,000, and it was about 3,900 square foot. And what I was able to do was, because it had like 10 bedrooms already and 4 bathrooms, I was able to kind of separate it out into a duplex. I think you started out as a duplex and then was converted to a single family home, because they got rid of the kitchen. So what I had to do was add in a new kitchen, and then basically separate out the top floor from the bottom floor and have separate entrances. So that cost for the new kitchen, it cost about 19,700, and then separating out, like putting up the walls and everything, cost me about 5,000 or so. And so the all-in renovations was around 24,000, but I got the house for 367,000. So the mortgage itself was around 2,500 or something like this. I think actually maybe even a little bit less than that. And I was able to rent out the house for $7,360 a month in rental income, because each room was about a little bit more than 700 a month. We had a really big loft that we rented out for 850, and actually 2 people ended up staying there for 30% more. So it was around 1120 to 1140 or something like that per month. So I rented out the whole house for 7,320 to a group of 10, or actually 12 baseball students. They were all on the same baseball team. They're all friends, and they wanted to take the entire duplex. So, for something like that, the rental income minus the mortgage payment already is almost $4,000 a month, roughly. And then, it made a lot of sense for me because, yes, I put in a good amount for renovations, like 24K or so, but the return was, almost $4,000 a month, basically.
That is a significant return there on one individual property that you ultimately turned into a duplex. Can you talk about the kind of financing of it? Is it a traditional mortgage? Do you have to do anything differently because it's rent by the room, or can you just go and get traditional mortgages?
Yeah. So when you buy the house, usually I buy it vacant. And when you buy it vacant, you can do a conventional loan. And it doesn't matter if you're going to eventually turn it into a room rental or Airbnb or whatever. The lender will still use the same metrics and the same appraisal, the same market rent, whatever, when they obviously uh, qualify you for the mortgage. So nothing changes there. The only change is if you refinance the house, it might be a little bit harder to do certain types of loans like a DSCR loan. So most mortgages or most of the lenders I've used have been just conventional investment loans. But once you hit 10 properties, they shut you off. You can't do conventional loans anymore because of Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac guidelines. So I had to start doing DSCR loans because I hit that limit. I have 14 rentals right now, so I had to start doing DSCR loans. And those ones are a little bit more strict with the co-living if you're refinancing. But if you're purchasing the property, they just use the appraisal market rent, and they don't think about like, oh, is this going to be a co-living facility or not? It doesn't really matter to them because they're just using what's off of the appraisal.
And
Um,
can
yeah,
you
go
just
ahead.
share for anyone who's listening into this that might not be aware of what a DSCR loan is?
Yeah, so DSCR stands for Debt Service Coverage Ratio Loan, meaning the rental income is at least covering the mortgage payment. So if your mortgage payment is $2,000 a month, you want your rental income to be 2,000 or more. Usually 25% more. So it could be like 2,500 is the rental income, and the estimated mortgage on it would be 2,000. Then that allows you to get qualified for that property, for buying that property. And you don't actually have to show W 2 income to be able to do a DSCR loan because instead of using the W 2 income to qualify you, it's actually using the rental income, the estimated rental income the house could make to qualify you for buying that house. So it's a really powerful loan. It's also 30-year fixed. A lot of it is similar to a conventional loan in that sense. Because you're just making fixed payments for 30 years. The main difference is usually there's a prepayment penalty for like the first 3 years or 5 years. If you were to refinance it within the 3 to 5 years, you usually have to pay a small penalty fee. But other than that, DSCR loans work pretty similar to the 30-year. I would say the interest rates are a little bit higher, right? But they're also really great to use for investors.
And so you've used a number of different strategies for financing the homes. You mentioned traditional mortgages. You mentioned DSCR loans.
Mhm.
You've also used a number of kind of HELOCs as a tool
Yeah,
to kind of continue to build your portfolio.
yeah.
What is a
HELOCs are
HELOC?
really cool.
How does that work? And how have you made that such a successful tool?
For sure. Yeah. So imagine you buy in a good neighborhood, a decent neighborhood, and maybe it's got a lot of job growth, population's increasing, and the appreciation is on average like 6 or 7% per year. Well, after just 3 years, that means 7% times 3 years is 21%. So the house goes up 21%. Now, most houses only require 20% down. So if you put 20% down and the house goes up 21%, you're essentially doubling your money because, you only, let's say it's a 300K house, you put 60K down, it goes up 21%. That means it went up 60,000. So every 3 years, if you're investing in a decent neighborhood, you're essentially doubling your money just from appreciation alone. If you're, getting about 7% appreciation per year, and what you're allowed to do with a HELOC is actually take out that money as cash. So that 21% appreciation, I can take that out as cash and use it as a down payment on the next rental property. Now, I didn't know this at first. Basically, I when I was buying my fourth property, the lender told me I don't have enough money in the bank to buy it, and which was kind of embarrassing because we were already 2.5 weeks in, and he was like, "Yeah, you don't have enough money here." And then he said, "Well, but you said you had three other properties. Why don't you check out if you have equity on those properties?" And it turned out I did. I actually had 100K built up in equity, and I was able to take that out as the HELOC and use that to buy the fourth property that I purchased. And so every 3 years, you can basically take out a HELOC, 3 or 4 years, I would say, on each property to buy another one. So every 3 years, you're essentially doubling the number of properties you have.
And how many times have you gone through that HELOC process?
4 times so far.
Okay.
hmm
And you said you're now at 14 properties that
14, yes, that's
14.
right. With
And
90 tenants.
how many rooms is that in total?
90 students. So yeah, roughly 90 bedrooms as well.
Wow. Okay. So
Mhm.
you've basically got 90 bedrooms, um, 14 properties. There must be a lot that goes into kind of systems in place, like finding the right tenants. What
Mhm.
happens? Is it typically 12-month leases? What happens at the turn of those leases? Can you talk a little bit about the kind of systems you have in place?
Yeah, so for leasing, we always do August to August leasing. And they always have the option to sublet during the summer. A lot of times, I mean, even if it's a 12-month lease and they're paying $700 a month, that's still cheaper than paying $1,200 a month for 9 months on and living on campus and having to live with somebody else and pay for a meal plan. So a lot of students still, they don't care if it's 12 months. I even had somebody, this is an interesting story. I had somebody who he got qualified for this financial aid for room and board. And if he doesn't use it, he basically loses it. But what happened is his grandpa or his grandparents got sick. I think it was grandpa or something like that. So he actually moved back home and just lived with the grandpa and left the room empty for the entire year. But because the scholarship or financial aid or whatever, if he didn't use it, he would lose it. He paid for an entire year and didn't live in it at all. So it was basically an empty room, but it was being paid for $700 a month for 12 months. So yeah, students, what's interesting about students is they have multiple ways of paying. They have student loans, they have financial aid, and they have parents paying. So you always pretty much get rent paid. It's very consistent source of income because what parent is going to want to stop paying the rent for their for their kid's room and have that kid get evicted while they're trying to study at their college, right? Most parents don't do that. So yeah, it's nice you have that parent as a guarantor on the leases. As a backup in case something were to happen, maybe there was damage done at the house. The parents usually end up, forking up the money to pay for the repair or whatever that their kid caused, if that happens. But for the most part, we target graduate students who are pretty, very professional type of tenant. They're really focused on their studies. They really just go home to shower and sleep, and they're back off at school or in lab or whatever, right? So it's a really good system to build the student housing system. Plus, what we do is we offer referral bonuses. So a lot of these kids, they're very well connected socially. They'll bring in their group of like 4 or 5 friends. So if you have, let's say, next year, some people are moving out, one of them will jump in and say, "Hey, I got 3 friends that want to move in with me. Is that okay?" And so basically the rooms kind of fill themselves by word of mouth once you build up a large enough portfolio. I would say of like 2 or 3 properties, people start knowing your name.
And do you have like a property manager that helps support you, a property management company, or do you manage all of it yourself?
Right. So I don't have a formal property management company. What I do is I separate, basically, there's 2 systems. There's the marketing system, and then there's like maintenance / customer support, right? So for the marketing, I have a virtual assistant in the Philippines who's full time do that. And they're based on a commission plan. So the more rooms they fill, obviously, the more they get paid. Um, and I have the management system, which is also handled kind of by a VA, but also by somebody who's local, boots on the ground, who can go and give tours. They can go through the house with a home checklist on quarterly to do home inspections and just note like water leaks and that type of stuff if those are occurring. They can also help the tenants move in and move out. Help with that process for taking before and after pictures. Like if there's any damages, for example, they can record that and upload it for us. And then we use a system called Buildium to keep track of everything. So rent payments, maintenance tickets, making sure maintenance tickets are responded to. We do have a Rolodex of contractors, our go-to plumbers, electricians, roofers, HVAC technicians, etc. So you definitely want to build out those lists, people that you trust. And then you can have a system that kind of runs on its own. I invest out of state. I also invest in state in California in order to have a good, out of state portfolio that runs like clockwork. You really want to build out those types of systems.
So you, Ryan, clearly know your stuff around kind of rent by the room, and
Mm.
you've now turned into a mentor as well as still continuing to do this for yourself. Can you talk us through did you ever have any mentorship, or did you do this by trial and error and just continuing to get better at it? And then talk us a little bit about what you offer to your students. You've obviously given us a lot of great insight already. You've probably barely scratched the surface of what it ultimately means and you have to get into, but talk us a little bit about mentorship in general.
Yeah, the problem with the rent by the room student housing is there's not too many people who teach rent by the room strategy. There's a few people out there. At the time that I started, there was like nobody. And so I kind of had to learn by trial and error. My realtor, like I said, mentored me a little bit, but they didn't, teach me how to do individual leases, how to find students, marketing, all that stuff. I kind of had to learn it all on my own. But I've been doing this for a decade, and I figured, well, this is such a great strategy to get started in real estate investing, to get your feet wet. It's almost like house hacking. You kind of just like learn through the ropes. But if you have a system in place, it makes things so much easier. Having a system for marketing, leasing, a system for finding the right deals that will do very well with the student housing strategy, all of that. And so that's why I now offer mentorship, because it was so powerful in allowing me to reach financial freedom at a very early age. I retired from my pharmacist job at the age of 31, just by replacing that cash flow with the student rentals. And so I wanted to, share it with others, because there's not too many people teaching this and helping people go through this process. So the mentorship program is a true A through Z program, where I walk someone through the market analysis, deal analysis, how to renovate the property to create those extra bedrooms, market it, lease it out, manage it, and create a system where basically you can spend, at first it'll be like maybe 4 hours a week that you're spending on building it. But then after that, everything's set up. It's probably a 1 to 2 hour a week type thing. Usually 1 hour a week, depending on how old the house is and how much maintenance it might require. But with that being said, yeah, it's nowadays I spend about an hour a week, hour and a half to 2 hours a week to manage all 90 tenants, because I have a true like system in place and the right team, etc. So I teach others how to obviously build that team and build that system for themselves.
That's incredible. I mean, retiring from your W-2 at the age of 31 is no small feat. Building a portfolio of 90 students across 14 different properties, again, no small feat. And if you're only spending less than 2 hours a week to do that, and some of the returns you were sharing, $4,000 per month on just one of those properties, you can start to see how quickly that can compound and ultimately support a lifestyle that you would do. I guess the question is, what do you do with the rest of your time then, Ryan, if you've only got an hour and a half a week that you're spending on managing these properties?
I spend a lot of my times teaching others how to do this. I really believe that one-on-one coaching is the best way to learn. And so that's what I offer for my students, is just one-on-one calls, like, 30 minutes, hour calls through Zoom meetings weekly to twice a month, depending on, their schedule and everything. And so I spend a lot of time doing that, but I also been spending a lot of time like building AI systems that have supported my business. A recent example is something I call the company brain, where it transcribed 700 meetings that we've had in the last 3 years, and it can pull up anything from any of those meetings. You just ask it like, "Hey, what happened? Like, how many vacations does this person take?" Or like, just whatever questions you want. Does this list the pros and cons of this contractor? What was the last bid that they gave us for this project? And what were the dates of that meeting, for example? And so, building those AI systems have really saved our team a lot of time. and money. So I just focus on building things like that to support us.
And where can somebody get in touch with you if they're listening to this? They think, this is an avenue that I would like to explore. Where can people get in touch with you? What should people be searching for?
Yeah, so you can get my free PDF guide and also contact through my website at www.newbierealestateinvesting.com/guide. That's www.newbierealestateinvesting.com/guide. And newbie is spelled NEWBIE. And you also get like tips and strategies and how I lost money and how I recovered from it, all of that about like how to get started and rent by the rooms using the rent by the room strategy for student housing.
Yeah, we'll put the link in the description of the video so people can ultimately click on that directly. What would your number one piece of advice be for anyone who is looking to start investing in real estate?
You just got to get started. Invest in the right neighborhood. Don't invest in the bad neighborhood, but you want to just get started as soon as you can. There's a lot of strategies out there. My favorite is, of course, renting by the room. But you can do Airbnb. You can rent out to a whole family. You can do Section 8 housing. There's so many options out there. You just got to get started and see kind of what makes sense for you and what you're drawn to.
All right. Well, Ryan, we really do appreciate your time. Anybody who is interested in this, look into the description, go speak to Ryan. He clearly knows what he's talking about. Again, retired by the age of 31, has over 14 properties now with 90 different students. And he works an hour and a half a week on that. And then the rest of his time is spent teaching others. So take use of that time. And again, Ryan, thank you very much. If you're listening to this, please like, subscribe to the podcast, and we'll have another episode for you soon.
Thanks again for inviting me on.
Thank you.